So HelSec, thank you for having me. I can see some familiar faces in the audience, so pleasure to be here. My name is Nour. I work for Recorded Future, and today I wanted to talk to you guys about exposing the dangers of poor password management with security intelligence. So we're going to go through a couple of very real-life examples of how poor password management can affect organizations. We're going to look at actual advertisements on special access forums and deep web forums and dark web forums and such, as to the tools that are used by threat actors in order to take advantage of poor password management. So let's dig into it. I guess maybe a question for the Discord channel, and something that we can find out if anyone got this at the end of the talk, but what do these three companies have in common? So an Indian airliner, a budget airliner, a sort of IoT doorbell provider owned by Amazon, and a mostly North American insurer. Three seemingly random companies. They all have in common that they've all suffered successful credential stuffing attacks. So these are all companies that have suffered major breaches simply due to the fact that they were victims of credential stuffing attacks. So State Farm, for example, suffered a credential stuffing attack in which a bad threat actor was able to confirm some valid username and password combinations for State Farm accounts. Just pure brute forcing and pure luck. Ring, which is owned by Amazon, actually faced a lawsuit because a family whose camera was in one of their children's bedroom was hacked and was exposed. Again, the criminals used common passwords to brute force their way into that family's Ring camera account. SpiceJet as well suffered a breach that affected about 1.2 million passengers. Again, the threat actors were able to access the SpiceJet internal systems purely by brute forcing easily guessable passwords. So these are some very common instances, or these are the sort of the high profile instances. But you may be thinking to yourself, okay, well, these are a bit obscure. This is an Indian airliner, two companies based in America, none of which are based in mainland Europe. How does this really affect me, or how maybe is this closer to home? And the reality of this is that abuse of credentials is absolutely prevalent. If you look at the top threat action varieties in a breach, meaning what were the actual techniques used in a successful breach or a breach that was reported publicly, only second to phishing, the use of stolen creds is more popular than any other method of breaching a corporate network. So only phishing is above the use of stolen creds for the purpose of hacking or breaching a network. So over 80% of breaches involve brute force or the use of lost or stolen credentials. Why? Because it's so easy. What we're seeing right now in the industry is that the barrier for entry for cyber criminals is becoming very low. You can pretty much purchase tools that will do certain tasks for you that require very minimal expertise, very minimal skills. The barrier for entry is becoming so low, and the use of stolen credentials is just too easy and too tempting for most threat actors, especially amateur to mid-level threat actors who really can't be bothered with the likes of custom backdoors or writing their own exploits, or even paying for some of the most expensive Trojans or droppers or rat tools. They'd rather just use a simple tool that allows them to try out some username and password combinations. Very, very popular. And the source is there in the bottom right-hand corner, which is the Verizon Data Breach Report for 2020. So why is it so popular and why is it so successful? And that's because password reuse is rampant and is indiscriminate. So 98% of users reuse their passwords verbatim. So there's no variety in the password whatsoever. If your password is cats on one website, it's cats on another. So that means that if a user's credentials leak for a specific resource, that can be reused for another resource. So if my Spotify account leaks, I can almost guarantee that that password is probably the exact same one that I use for LinkedIn, the same one that I might use for internal corporate credentials. And if, even if I ask my friends, they're very satisfied with the fact that they all have the same password for everything. For them, it's like job done. So, no need to remember new passwords. You can just remember one and then you're good to go. But obviously that's very dangerous because that allows threat actors to very easily reuse credentials for both non-important and important resources. So while the average user is sitting there very happy with themselves, they've actually put themselves at risk and also put corporations at risk simply by this one little action on the user's behalf. So why do organizations struggle with this in particular? It really comes down to visibility, and I would say visibility is the number one factor here. So on the right-hand side, I've got two screenshots, one from Pastebin and one from the Genesis store, and we can talk about both. So credentials appear everywhere. I mean, there's such a wide variety of sources in which credentials can appear on. Paste sites, credential dumps that are available on forums, either for purchase or for non-purchase. They could just be published to a forum publicly. Virus total submissions, this is one that most people forget, is that threat actors or even security researchers, as soon as they find a data dump or they come across a data dump, the first thing they do is they submit that to virus total in order to see if it gets any negative verdicts. If it doesn't, then the file is clean and they can open it up and they haven't been scammed and they haven't accidentally bought a piece of malware instead of some credentials. But in doing so, you then see credentials popping up all the time on virus total. It's probably the number one source that we see credentials come up nowadays, which is just simply the fact that they're being submitted to virus total for a simple check. And then high tier forums as well. All of these different source types are very hard to keep up with. These are dynamic source types, constantly changing, new information every day. It's hard to keep up with those source types because they're so dynamic. And as you see on the right-hand side here, sometimes that paste that you were looking for might be removed by the author. So sometimes a threat actor will post a list of usernames and passwords to a paste, and then we'll delete that paste maybe after 8 hours, 24 hours. So if you had no mechanism to be or to have a snapshot of that paste at that point in time when it was posted, you've lost that information forever. There's no way to get that back unless it was somehow cached somehow. So it's really about visibility and keeping up with these forum types. The access to the forums can be a huge issue. A lot of people really cannot be bothered with the difficulty of getting into some of these forums. Some of these are very high tier forums. They require payment for entry. They require vetting. So, who are you? Where do you live? What do you do? What's your past experience? Can you breach this website for us to prove that you're part of the game? So a lot of this is access to these forums can also be very difficult. The low tier forums, fine, you can get into those because you simply just pay a fee and you're in. But some of the more sophisticated high tier forums are very careful as to who they let in and who they don't. Language skills also, I mean, your mother tongue is most likely not going to be the tongue that is most used across different forums. Even as a language speaker, most activity that I see is probably in Russian, in Chinese, and in English, Farsi, Arabic. I would say Portuguese now, since the Brazilian community is coming up massively now, because there's almost no guardrails in Brazil as to what you can do online. So that means that the average team who wants to proactively monitor these credentials has to be very proficient in a lot of different languages, which might be an unreasonable task. You might have one Russian speaker in the group, luckily, but can they really keep up to speed with every conversation going on? And that's just one language of maybe 10 that dominate the amount of content that is created on these forums. So that's something to consider also. So a lot of organizations struggle with these sort of issues. On the right-hand side, you can see a screenshot of the Genesis store. This is a very, very popular forum nowadays. I shouldn't call it a forum, it's more of a market. It's basically a place where you can buy an individual's fingerprint, their online fingerprint. So everything that embodies that person's entity online can be purchased and can be mimicked. So their OS, their cache, their cookies, their browser that they use, their credentials, all of that is bundled into one package called a bot. And then you can purchase that bot for about $8, $10 sometimes. And you purchase that person's entire identity and all of the online logins that they have, corporate and non-corporate. So you buy their Amazon login, their eBay login, their internal access portal for maybe HR within their company. Everything is bundled in that one bot or package. So, and these are becoming extremely popular. And we see so many corporate resources being advertised as one of the many things that this person can log into, being sold on the Genesis store. Again, Genesis store is maybe something that your company does not allow you to access because it's hosted on an onion site. So maybe just purely by your corporate policy, you are not allowed to access such sites on the Tor network, which means that keeping up to date with such information is very, very difficult. So organizations struggle for a number of reasons. Summary, credentials appear all over the place, and it's very hard to keep track of all those source types. The access to the forums can be very difficult. The languages vary, and the life cycle of credentials can vary hugely, meaning you can have one credential that appears every couple of weeks if you're lucky, and then suddenly within a couple of minutes, you've got 20 that appear in a bulk file. So it's very dynamic, and you can't predict the cadence at which they appear. So what tools does an amateur to mid-tier threat actor use in order to take advantage of this abundance of credentials that appears out there in the ether? So we need to talk about two tools in particular, checkers and brute forcers. And what is the difference between these two? So let's dive into it for a bit. So a checker is basically an automated tool, a script or software that's used by criminals to check the validity of the logins that they've acquired. So I stumble upon a list of maybe 2,000, 3,000 credentials. I want to check if they're valid. So I want to make sure that these are even valid logins before I even attempt. And that's what a checker will do. So a checker will basically interact with a website's main page, or maybe their mobile app, or even their API. And it will just systematically and programmatically go through every single login that you've acquired and check it across multiple sites. So you can see here in this checker, for example, there are different configs for different sites. And a config just basically means that that checker knows how to check a specific resource. So if you say, and this checker is called WOXI 3.0, very popular one, especially for email. You can say, okay, well, WOXI, I'm going to load up the amazon.co.uk or amazon.fi config, and then that'll kick into gear. And then the Amazon config will check every credential that you input and see if any of them are valid. Very useful tool because, like I said before, those passwords can be reused for a number of different things. So now you're not just checking if the login is valid, you're also checking where it's valid. How many other resources can I access with that same username and password pair? So if I've acquired, an individual's amazon.co.uk login, I'm going to use this checker to check if it works on maybe other resources like, I don't know, maybe an Apple login, or let's keep it even more specific, maybe PHP admin or Magenta, for example. So you can choose this for different resources. Very, very, very useful tool that a threat actor will use. And then we have brute forcers. Brute forcers are even more simple than that. It's basically an automated password cracking tool. So if you're familiar with the likes of John the Ripper or THC Hydra, these are very popular brute force tools that get taught in most SANS courses, for example. Probably the first one you'll use is John the Ripper or THC Hydra. This one in particular, Guru Brute, has become very, very popular across different forums that we've been monitoring. And all it is a password cracking tool to gain access to a user account. So the beauty of this, or the genius of it, is that it will use a bot network to basically simultaneously try different username and password combinations from a host of different IP addresses. So instead of the same machine trying 1,000 different password attempts and most likely being blocked or detected easily, you have a whole network of computers or bots using different IP addresses, and then those bots can attempt each between them maybe 2 or 3 credentials, which isn't in itself malicious. If you're an IT admin, you would not be able to spot that. And brute forcing is so popular that brute force attempts of cracking into someone's accounts outweigh legitimate logins by about 4 to 1. So for every 1 legitimate login on the internet, there have been about 4 brute force attempts to match that. Extremely, extremely popular. Now, this tool will just guess, right? It's guessing using a dictionary of words. It's guessing using common passwords used like 123 or admin1 or, you know, password. So it'll have a dictionary of words that it's trying to use, and it will simply just brute force those accounts. So here's an example of how this particular tool works. So this is the panel of that tool, which is very interesting because in the middle, you can see all of the different bot machines. So all of the different IP addresses that are being used, the OS of those machines, when they were last online, the country that they're imitating or hosted on. These are legitimate machines that are all around the world. So this is the location of that machine. And these are the machines that are going to be carrying out your brute force attempts. So in a very user-friendly panel, I'm able to, this isn't a screenshot of my brute force login. This is just a generic one, obviously. But this is a very, very easy to understand example of a brute forcer that is using multiple different machines. You can then import your file, which is your email addresses that you want to crack, and then it will try different passwords and it will keep going. And this software can be purchased for about, I mean, I've seen brute forces for about $500, maybe on the low end. That's like the light version. And then you can get premium versions for about $2,450 US. So private versions means that you can set up an entire tool set of checking and brute forcing. You get customer support. Maybe you get a different discount every now and then. So, you know, these guys know the power of customer service and the power of promotions as well as any of us. So again, they employ the use of a botnet, which then distributes the load across all of these different multiple machines for different login attempts from different IPs. So you can have maybe 176 different machines, all using different IP addresses, like you can see here in the screenshot, all of them doing maybe a single login or maybe 2, which makes it extremely difficult for organizations to monitor this kind of thing. And here's what the result would look like. So once you're done with your checking, the tool will actually list every successful attempt by the actual resource. So here we can see WordPress, Magento, WordPress again, PHP admin. So we can see the different tools. We can see how many of our credentials were good, how many of them were bad. And we can even see the progress of how fast we're going. So again, this is really easy, intuitive software. And you'll see why I keep making this point in a bit, in the sense that, you know, this is now lowering the barrier of entry for threat actors who want to maybe pursue this sort of attack attempt. So why does it make it so easy? Even for the most unskilled cyber criminal, these sorts of software give you a lot of different advantages. So number one, it's a web-based application. So there's no more intimidating command line or specialized technical knowledge that you need to have. This is all done within the UI. It comes with technical support. They help you with installation. They help you with configuration. There's a live help desk that you can reach out to, and they will help you debug some issues that you're having or help you work through the software. So again, the emphasis on customer care. So it comes with technical support. You can buy your own list of domains for the control panel, or you can use one supplied by the actual Brute Guru admin. So you can ask the person that you bought this checker, this brute forcer from, and checker, this one is a combined tool, to supply you with a list of email addresses. So as part of the deal, if you pay a bit extra, you not only have the software, but you have your first data dump to actually try for yourself, as part of the deal. So here's the car, and not only do you have the car, you have the gas as well, or the petrol, excuse me. So you have the fuel and the actual machine that you need. It comes with preloaded dictionaries of passwords, so you don't even have to supply the password file. So previously, I think within John the Ripper, you have to supply it with a list of passwords, right? Or maybe it comes with one out of the box if you're lucky. This one comes preloaded with dictionaries of password combinations from various breaches. So there are so many high-profile breaches, like the LinkedIn breach back in 2016. Off the top of my head, probably the Dropbox breach, Spotify, Ticketfly was a big one last year. All of these breaches are so common, you can throw them into the software for good measure. And that's what makes these tools so popular and so easy to use. Now, you can also, as a customer of this software, you can create your own botnet, or you can rent one from the admin again. So even before here, where you saw the use of a botnet, you might have been asking yourself, okay, well, does that mean I have to run my own botnet? Absolutely not. You can just rent one from the admins of this software. And then it has bulletproof hosting services as well that can be purchased directly from the website of this UI. So if you're worried about hosting, you can also get it from the same provider of this software. It sounds too easy. And the answer to that question is that it is, or the answer to that comment is that it is ridiculously easy now. I mean, it sounds easy because it is easy. And if you see here this screenshot from a very well-known forum, you can see that the top most popular topic within that forum or thread is brute forcing. So email brute forcing, game brute forcing as well. And then you can see checkers are the third most popular topic of discussion on this forum. And here on the bottom right-hand side, you can see that this was a little snippet from the Recorded Future platform, actually, in which we saw a conversation in that thread by the admin of Guru Brute, which is the tool that we were looking at earlier. And you can see now that there's a special price for 5 copies of the product. And that special price will go until the end of quarantine. The price will be in effect. So these threat actors are very well aware that COVID has forced everyone online, changed the way that we work, forced companies to have more of an online presence. So now, being the opportunistic criminals that they are, they've reduced the price or given a special promotion for the software in order to take advantage of that. We've seen a huge ramp up in amateur or beginner cyber criminals entering the scene. And there's no mistaking why. There's so much software out there that is so easy to use at very affordable prices. So it entices a lot of people to get into the mix, and allows them to be part of the community. So if I just go back one slide, this screenshot shows you a number of compromised sites like Magento and WordPress and PHP. It's no wonder that Magic Cart attacks were such a huge headline last year. So Magic Cart is basically just the act of embedding malicious JavaScript into Magento in order to strip personal information details from a checkout of an online store. Very, very simple technique, but you can see there's no wonder why there are so many Magic Cart related attackers, because it's so easy to find open Magento credentials. So it's very easy for a user to then pivot to the PII data and facilitate the theft of that customer PII payment data. If you've got admin access to any one of these tools, you can inject whatever compromised scripts that you have onto that site. So it's all about lowering the barrier to entry. At this rate, your cat could do what a sophisticated threat actor would have to learn advanced skills to achieve maybe 10 years ago, 15 years ago. The barrier to entry is becoming extremely low. It's very difficult for organizations to keep track of such credential breaches and leaks. And it's providing a huge problem because it's the second most popular breach method after phishing. So it's clearly a huge topic, which is facilitated by such easy to use software. So how can we mitigate this? So this isn't all doom and gloom. We've actually got some decent mitigation methods here. So maybe take a screenshot of this. Increasing the awareness of your organization. I think this goes without mentioning. Let people know that, you know, the passwords that they use for corporate resources should not be the ones that they use for their buying pet food online. You know, the two should not be the same. Having password managers, the ones that generate and store and retrieve unique passwords, those are absolutely critical. You know, things like LastPass, you know, there are so many different password managers out there that you can use. Requiring additional details, for example, a CAPTCHA or the user's last name, that helps mitigate it because that's an extra field that might not have been part of the credential dump that the threat actor might have gotten their hands on. Multi-factor authentication, it won't prevent or save your life when it comes to credential stuffing, but it definitely adds a layer of security. So it just means that you're adding that extra layer of authentication and you're making that threat actor's life that extra bit difficult. And that's really what multi-factor authentication is about. Establish customized web application firewalls so that you have special attention to the most unusual orders or user agents. If you're getting multiple connections from multiple machines regularly and you see a pattern in that behavior, that's maybe something to identify. You can slow down and rate limit login traffic to discourage attackers. So you can lock out accounts after a certain amount of failed login attempts or introduce a delay in the server's responses to login requests. And this one's absolutely crucial. Remove unused public-facing login paths and tighten controls. You'd be surprised just on GitHub how many API login paths there are. I mean, we see this all the time. Public-facing paths that are just lying around on the internet that can be picked up by anyone. And also baseline your traffic so that you know what normal requests look like on any given day. So unexpected traffic or unexpected volumes or requests can be identified. There's a whole bunch of mitigation steps that can be said through the use of an intelligence provider. I thought to keep this quite vendor neutral, but just know that there are, you know, without some shameless promotion, there are numerous ways to mitigate such threats using a proper intelligence provider, not to name a particular one. But there are definitely ways that you can stay ahead of the curve rather than trying to look for these credentials yourself. The ability to be alerted to these in real time, have a provider that is moving at the scale of the internet that can keep up with these different forums, keep up with these different credentials as they appear, and understand all the different languages that I mentioned earlier. So basically removing the need for an army of analysts sitting in a room all reading Russian forums 24 hours a day. Why not let a machine do that and let your team do the more important stuff? So there is a lot to be said about having a proper intelligence provider and mitigating credential stuffing attempts. And with that, speaking of shameless promotion, this is my humble request to check out our Cyber Daily, which is a daily newsletter that we send out for free, Recorded Future, which gives you the top threat actors, industries. It's used by a lot of different publications around the globe. A lot of people sign up to our Cyber Daily just to get a daily snapshot. If you're familiar with the Cyberwire, they use our Cyber Daily just to get ahead of the curve every day as to what is going on in the intelligence world. And also feel free to download our free browser extension, which basically allows you to enrich indicators on any given web page. So if you're looking at a web page, you can basically get a live score for any indicators that appear on the page that might be critical or non-critical. So a very cool tool that's completely free that your tier 1 SOC analyst would absolutely love, or threat or initial responders. And with that, Ossi, that concludes my talk. So thank you guys for having me. I'll leave the page open. and we can answer some questions.
Yes, we do have some questions for you.
Fantastic.
So
Shoot.
I'm here now. Sorry, I was putting my classes back on and getting to the stream. So
those are cool glasses, I'll be honest. Those are very cool glasses.
Yeah, but yeah, we have a few questions for you. The first one is from PTK. They are asking how to secure MFA for the loss of device. Do you consider it safe to print the QR codes?
I would not. No, I think anytime you're printing something and leaving it out there, it's not a good idea. I think the best way to secure multi-factor authentication is to have a layer of authentication that requires something that isn't readily available. So I would even avoid phone numbers. Some sort of additional token is the best way, frankly, an additional token. Something to just add an extra layer of nuisance for that threat actor to make it less easy for them is my best guess. Yeah.
All right. Then there is another question. Do you have any hints? What is the most easy mitigation measure for like basic users? And the basic users in this case means users who think the password manager is too complex.
Yes. I'd say the most basic, okay, yeah, password managers can be a bit complex sometimes for sure, especially onboarding for them. A lot of people tend to avoid the use of password managers because they see it as a hindrance. I'd say the most easy or entry-level way is to baseline your network activity, which is, if you have a good idea as to what is your normal week or normal day in terms of attempts, you can baseline that and you can identify anomalies. I would also say that just having an alert system is so easy. If you have an alert system that tells you, for example, okay, company X had 3 credentials that were exposed today. You can then take those 3, place additional measures on those, change those individuals' passwords, and then you know who to focus on instead of trying to protect all 10,000 people within the organization. You can just focus on the ones that get exposed as they pop up across the internet. Because I think there's one point that I forgot to mention, which is really important. We can't control what people do outside of work, meaning there are going to be exposed credentials because people keep using their corporate email address for things outside of corporate needs. So we keep seeing corporate email addresses being used for social media, for ordering stuff online. That is just going to happen and you have no way to control that. So it's good to be aware of those things and have the visibility into those events as they occur, I would say, is a very, very easy way of going about it.
All right, thank you very much. Next question is from Yaroneko. How about using canary logins to alert on brute forcing attempts?
So, okay, this is another technique that's been sort of on the rise. Again, it depends on the use of credentials. Where is that going? Who's using it? Do you want to deploy that organization wide? It's also an onboarding issue that you have to consider. So changing people onto that new technique might introduce some difficulties. It really depends on, does the company want to embrace such login attempts? So it really, really depends, I think. You have to think of the user experience as well, is what I'm trying to say.
All right. One more question. I think I already know the answer for this one, but the question is the browser extension open source?
It is not. No, no. It's proprietary, but please feel free to use it. I mean, we have so many people who use it just for getting an idea. So if you're looking at a web page, it's just so much easier to fire it up than try to enrich every single indicator on that page.
All right, perfect. So we are going to have a 10-minute break, and then we will continue with the next we'll talk.
Good stuff.
So
Thank you for
10
having me.
minutes. Thank you very
All right.
much.
Excellent.